While you're getting settled, we invite you to go ahead and open the chat panel and tell us where you're from and say hello.
Hello, school leaders. Welcome. And we got 5 more seconds. I'm going to respect the timer. We want to respect your time as well. So welcome, good afternoon, school leaders, to the webinar today. My name is Mike, and with me from EduScape is Marcy. She's right above me. I don't know if that's the same on your screen as it is on mine. With me as well is Andrea from NCEA, and I'm going to turn it over to her in just a few moments. And then Alex is also with us. So to give you a little bit of background, EduScape is a professional development company where we challenge educators to rethink learning and to rethink learning by looking into collaboration and innovative solutions. We often partner with NCEA to deliver workshops such as this and to really support the educator community in Catholic schools. Today, our focus is going to be the Leading Remote Instruction with Google, a Catholic Principles Guide. So we're going to go through a couple of points of logistics. We're going to actually start off with prayer, and then we'll dive into the content for today. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrea to say a few words.
Again, it's nice to see you, and for those of you who were with us last week, you'll hear my birds chirping again in the background. Thanks for joining us and EduScape and bringing this content to you. We're happy to have so many of our Catholic school leaders and teachers coming together to do the best job we can for supporting students and their families during this time. Let's ask the intercession of our Blessed Mother as we pray in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I'll turn it back over to Marcy and Mike to lead us through our content today, but I have to tell you that as someone who is both experiencing this as an educator and a parent simultaneously, I found all of this super helpful, and I'm glad that we can be here today to help you out as well. So please put those questions in the Q&A, and please keep following NCEA as well as EduScape for ongoing professional development. I know our team at NCEA is working hard to curate things hour by hour, updating our website. So stay tuned on both fronts there. Mike, Marcy, you want to take it over?
Yeah, thank you, Andrea, and thank you for being with us today. So let's go over our content for the day. We're really focusing on, let's look at the pedagogy side first and the practical side, and then we'll get into the logistics. So our agenda for today is we're going to be looking at initial tech considerations. So as a school leader, what does this look like? Creating your plan. So there's lots of stuff out there, lots of suggestions, lots of recommendations, but for you and your school, your staff, your teachers, your students, let's create that plan. Then we're going to take a look at what does that plan look like through the use of Google. And then finally, we're going to look at Q&A. Now, our total time together today is about 55 minutes. 45 minutes are going to be diving into the content, and about 10 minutes or so will be our Q&A at the end. I'll go over some of the actual technology in just a moment so you can see how you can put in your questions and where we'll be responding as well. Our takeaways for today, before we get there, Marcy, she's like ready to go. She's just ready to teach. So our learner outcomes for today is that we're going to be looking at those non-negotiable instructional design elements. So what that basically means is what does an online learning school look like? And what are those different components that as we're considering developing our remote instruction and leading that, what does that look like? We're going to discuss questions up front you should ask yourself just to think about what is the functionality of this remote learning and the technology tools that I have at my disposal. We're going to take a look at attendance policies, grading policies, and computer time. We're also going to review a list of the most critical applications that need to be enabled in your Google console, which means we're also going to explore the Google Management Console. And then finally, we're going to look at communication with parents. So we're going to hit all of this in 45 minutes. Are you ready? No, we're not there yet. We have some logistics first with technology to go over. So 2 points. One, please ask all of your questions in the Q&A section of Zoom. So if you look down at the bottom of your screen, you're going to notice that you have some features. Please direct all of your questions into the Q&A. We will also answer in there. I might also mark some as we'll answer live. That will be posted until the end so that we can have a fuller conversation about it. Now, the reason we want you to use the Q&A feature is that we're at about 107 people in this group right now. And what will tend to happen if you post your questions in the chat, we might miss it because people are sharing ideas, they're sharing resources. So please, please, please put your questions in the Q&A. Now that brings me to the chat. The chat button is on the right-hand side. Please note that where it says to, please select everyone in some cases, or in other cases it says all panelists and attendees. That just ensures that your messages are being sent to everyone and not just the 4 screens that you're seeing. Finally, well, not finally, but if you look up on the top right, you'll see that there is an option for a speaker view versus gallery. If you want to see more screen than just the speaker, feel free to toggle through with that. Now, the webinar is being recorded. We're telling you this for 2 reasons. One, we're being good digital citizens, but don't worry, none of your faces will be put on here, mostly because if you look on the bottom left-hand corner, your mic and video have been disabled for this webinar. Being that we're at 113 and that number is just getting higher and higher as we go, we decided to use the text features such as the chat and the Q&A to facilitate our time together. The final reason that I wanted to let you know that the webinar is being recorded is because if for whatever reason this does not work, considering that colleges are jumping into Zoom this week, schools are starting to use Zoom and the traffic on the Zoom platform itself is very high, there is a possibility for it to crash. We're going to cross our fingers and believe that it won't, but if it does for whatever reason, you will receive the recording from earlier. If this session goes off without a hitch, you'll receive a link to this recording within the next coming days as well. Now, with all of that said, I think you have enough background knowledge to get started. So I'm going to turn it over to Marcy, and feel free to post in the Q&A throughout the session. I'll be moderating both the Q&A and the chat, dropping resources along the way. Let's do it.
All right, thanks, Mike. So first of all, as I get our slide changed over, I will say that some of you in this webinar as attendees are going to recognize this lady because you worked with her. There's a lot of New Orleans people that I saw in the group. So this is Dr. Miette. She's the principal of a local Catholic school, and very recently her school closed for at least a month due to COVID. And she has just launched online learning for her school, and I had the privilege to work alongside her and the rest of her administration and teachers as they did this. And so we're going to look at the steps they took to get to this point. And point of order, she did give permission for this picture to be used. First thing you've got to start to look at is what are the elements of online instruction that you're going to expect from your teachers. One of the areas to consider is your community and your communication. So what are going to be the opportunities for collaboration, for building community, for teacher and student communication, for students to communicate with other students? And we'll get into the specifics of these as we get a little deeper. But for learning and assessment, what standards are being used? What are the accountability measures? What are the changes that need to occur based on the fact that you're going from in-person to online learning? And how are you going to make shifts in assessment for remote learning? We'll also look at the technology. How are you going to support online instruction with technology? And that's going to be based largely on what technology you have available. So we'll start off with some initial tech considerations, but I do want to point out, while we're going to work in a kind of linear manner here, you may have to go back based on answers later and readjust some of your plans. This is going to be a work in progress for you through the whole thing. And so I think we're going to be working through a lot of changes as you go. So first thing you have to consider is, what do you have available? Do you have school technology that's assigned out to the kids? Or are you going to be seeing if they have the personal technology to use? And that depends on what you have access to. What about internet access? I know my own family is all locked out of my office right now while I'm giving this webinar. And so we're having to kind of make sure that we're not hogging all of the internet with everyone working from home. Do you know if your kids maybe have a cell phone that can access the internet? And if they do, you have to be wary of data. You can't do things that take too much data up, because not everybody's got an unlimited plan. Whatever the device, you also have to consider what are the apps that you might ask them to use, so that all of that can be prepared and used. So once you kind of start to analyze what you have access to, you're going to decide what is the setup that's needed. Does somebody need to set up devices, or does somebody maybe need to make adjustments to the settings of those devices? What about apps? Do they need to be pushed out? If you guys are using iPads or mobile devices and you're going to use Google, it is preferable to use the apps than the web, because they are just more stable to use. So does that need to be pushed out? Who's going to support your teachers and students? Is that one person? Do you have more than one? How are they going to communicate that they need help? Because many of you are already in situations where you are not at school. So how are you going to get this information out to them? This one's super, super important. What are your safe environment requirements? And, What are your safe environment requirements, and how can you comply? Use of video. I know that sometimes they're asking that the little kids don't use video. Maybe they're allowing the big kids to use video. Does it require you to get permission to do so? What about phone calls or texts to students? I know for our area that is usually prohibited. If that's still prohibited, how is that communication going to happen? How are you going to be in compliance? And it may be that phone calls or texts get sent to parents, not to students. Then you've got to start to think about building community with your technology. One of the things I think most of us are craving is that sense of community. I saw a lot of comments about that yesterday, as so many of us attended Mass online. We miss the people we see all of the time. And as faith-based people, we need to see what we can do to try and bring this into this situation. So I share this with permission, and I told her I would block out personal information. But this is just an example of something that came across Twitter or Facebook yesterday. And this is a parent I know in a Catholic school who got a call from the kids' school. And she said it just felt good for somebody to check on the kids. That meant the world to her. Somebody saying, we know you're there, and just making that communication. And maybe it's even just asking your teachers to check on their kids, or split it up some kind of way so that there are phone calls and connection. How are you going to keep your faith community engaged? I know that I've seen principals in the New Orleans area doing school assemblies on Facebook Live, where every morning they meet for prayer, the Pledge of Allegiance, and any announcement type information that needs to be sent out? What about maybe saying the rosary or asking if your priest can do a mass across one of these platforms, even if it's being done in your school Google accounts, a way to bring your community together during this time. Virtual announcements. Here we see Dr. Miette, and I thought this one was really great. She was in the empty hallways after school had been formally closed by the state, but they were in the process already of moving to online, but hadn't quite completed that move. But letting us know that they were looking forward to seeing the kids in the classes and that the halls were empty and they couldn't wait to connect again. Principals, you can update through things like Facebook Live. Maybe you do a voice podcast if you don't like to be on video. Maybe you're putting video to Twitter or other social media platforms that you use. Maybe you're sending a video out for your teachers to post it into their Google Classrooms. How can you keep these things that are typically part of your community, part of what you're doing online? Creating your plan. I can't stress this enough. What's right for your school may not be right for another. So as we look at these items, you're going to want to take some time to think about later as you put this all together. What does it look like for you, and how will instruction look like for your school community? One of those considerations is going to be attendance. Well, first of all, are you even taking it? There are some states that have waived attendance, so some schools are choosing not to take attendance. But if you are doing it, how are you going to check that? And I'll give you a few options here. If the kids are doing virtual meetings, like a live video meeting, maybe the teacher is going down the list and checking what kids are there and then checking in later on the kids who didn't show up. What assignments are they turning in? Maybe the fact that you turned in your assignment tells me you're attending. Maybe it's an email at a set time. Now, again, I always reference back to safe environment here. A lot of elementary schools and Catholic situations, or in Catholic schools, are told don't email with the little kids. So that might not be an option. Maybe it's students check in by adding a comment into your Google Classroom stream. Finally, maybe it's a Google form and you set it up to collect the student's email address and it date and time stamps it automatically when they submit. My one caution to you about the Google form is this. If your teachers are not already using Google Forms, be careful how many tools you're introducing to them during this time. We know the stress level is very high for everyone right now, so we want to make things as simple as possible. What are your time policies? Now, what we mean by that is, what rules are you, the leader, going to set forth for your faculty? Because if you don't give them guidance here, you may run into some problems. So is instructional time something like 1 hour a week? Is it where each class has 1 hour where they meet? Is it then that the work time, how much work the students should complete, should be about 2 hours a week? You need to consider those two pieces and how they fit for each class that the students are expected to complete online. Because you don't want overscheduling where they're having conflicting times to show up for teachers or they're having such piles of work. One option is to schedule classes, and we'll show you some samples of that in a moment. I urge you to think about what is age appropriate. Do you really want a kid who's in second grade sitting in front of the computer from 8 to 3 every day? So part of that age appropriateness includes seat time and screen time. How are you going to encourage them to take breaks? A lot of times our kids are in places where there are set points where we move around, whether that's to go to recess or to the restroom or to lunch or to PE. But they're now home. So how are we going to get them to move in between the variety of things that they're doing? So this is actually Dr. Miette's school's sample schedule. What they've asked the kids to do is each period or each class is going to have an hour and 20-minute time slot once a week. This is the time where they can hold virtual class. Now, she was very clear that that did not mean that a teacher had to be on the video for an hour and 20 minutes lecturing to the kids. It could be that the teachers maybe just do a quick little check-in, see their faces, see how we're doing, answer any questions, and give assignments. And maybe they hang around in that video for a little bit to see if the kids need anything to get going. So it's not necessarily that it has to be screen time just because that's class time. Then what she's asked each teacher to do is an office hour. So once a week for about 50 minutes, they'll have a period of time where they're available for people to pop in. So maybe as a student, I have a question. I can jump in and ask my religion teacher, hey, what's going on? Or this is my question. Really important is at the very bottom, it says teacher partners can be assigned for office hours. They are asking their teachers to not be alone in office hours because it could end up being just one teacher and one student if just one kiddo pops in. So they're being careful and trying to make sure that the teachers are covered. And we'll talk about a technology way to help with classes for that in a little bit. This one's super important too. How can you do a trial run? Because you don't want the first time teachers experience this and students experience this to be as they're trying to worry about content delivery. So the first day, what they did is they had about 30 minutes. The teachers were told not to keep the kids the whole 30 minutes, but for about 20. And they were asked to just very simply go ahead and do a quick little test of their equipment, connect with the kids, maybe share kind of their plan for what it would look like in their class and expectations. And it gave the teachers a chance to get more comfortable with the video conferencing component and be able to get to that place where everybody could get in and they could make it work. I got a text message from a friend who is in administration locally, and she said, lesson number 1 from COVID teaching, please try not to do content the first time because it was very stressful for some of her teachers. Pacing and grades. This is a big one. We are seeing a big shift in what's going on. Are you expecting students to actually complete the same amount of work in this online setting as you would in the physical classroom? Remember that a lot of people are home with their whole family now. If you're like our state, we're under stay-at-home orders. And so there are people all around the house trying to find their space. You may have parents working from home that are trying to supervise younger kids in between actually completing their work. So how can you adjust those expectations to meet this situation? Please look to see, do you have grading guidance from the diocese or state? Some places they're dropping grades. Some they're continuing to collect grades. So whatever guidance you have, fall back to that too as you develop your plan. Are you expecting a specific amount of grades? I know as a classroom teacher, I was expected to have X amount of summative and X amount of formative every semester. Is that going to maybe need to be changed? And I think the one that's the biggest shift, especially for teachers to think about, is what are your assessment changes? Because that word cheating is in quotes specifically to point out that the things that we could have done with a student sitting in front of us for testing are not the same when they're at home, because many of them have these. And while some of the rules for some schools may say that those phones have to be off during school time, you may not catch them. They may look like they're leaning down for a piece of paper or a notebook and they're messing with their phone. So are you going to continue to give very traditional assessments, or are you instead going to maybe ask kids to produce something or to collaborate on something to show what they know? Another big piece, and this is one in my role I often see kind of missed, is instructional staff training. What do your teachers already know how to do? And please be very realistic with that one, because sometimes it's overestimated. What new topics are you going to need to provide training? What resources do you already have, and what do you need? And then the big question becomes, how do you train them? Because in a lot of cases, your teachers are already off of school grounds. So are you looking into somebody providing e-learning to your teachers that can help them to get up to speed even remotely? How are you communicating expectations? A lot of you are not with your staff. You know, are you going to create some kind of little guidebook or something that would help? So things to think about for getting your staff up to speed. This one's huge, and like Andrea, I also am a parent as well as a teacher, and I've been able to work alongside my own son's school, and it's been awesome because their communication's been powerful. Please start early, even if you have minimum information to give them. It might be something just to say, parents, you know, we're here for you. This is what we have so far, or we're working on the plan and we'll communicate more specific details as soon as we can. Often, don't let it go 3 or 4 days without information, because that's going to add to anxiety. Tell as much as you can about the plan you're making. Whatever details you can share, giving that reassurance, helping to build this new routine, will help build some stability and some comfort for our families. Define the methods you're going to use. And here I would tell you to make sure you try to stick to the things you were doing before if they're working well. You may be posting things through your school information system, social media accounts, email, notification programs that send texts, or even phone call notification programs. And you may want to do more than one. I will give you a reminder. You may have some parents that were previously getting email through their work accounts who may not have access to that if they're not allowed to go to work and they can't remote into work. So keep that in mind if you're considering email or as you use email. Now, here comes the other big piece. How do you plan for the Google use? Well, first of all, I'm going to point you back to something. What is your parent permission? Have you collected parent permission for using Google tools? If you haven't, it is a good practice to do that. And if they're already gone and you haven't, something like a Google form where you ask the parents to type in their name, which would count as a digital signature, just spell that out. Maybe it's an email. I was super impressed. My own son's school, they got the Google form back for permission for video. They had every student back in under 24 hours. And that tells you something about parents hungering to build this routine for our kids and not just have them sitting there. One of your core tools, and it might be one that kind of just gets ignored in the background, is Google Drive. It's your hub. And I always say, think of it as a virtual flash drive, like you would plug in. That hub is going to be where all your things save. So when you use the various Google tools, this is where your files are getting saved. It makes it really easy for access and sharing. Do the best you can for your teachers to create a streamlined workflow so they're not going into too many places. Now, let's talk about a toolbox. What kind of tools are we going to use with them? So a couple of things we'll probably use. One is Google Classroom. Google Classroom is a hub that kind of sits in the front, and what it does is stores things in Google Drive. It allows for teachers to share information, to share assignments, to share materials. They can collect their work. They can give feedback on their work. And it also allows for students to communicate with each other depending on your settings. So it becomes a hub of an online classroom. Google Meet. Sometimes you may have heard of Google Hangouts, and Google's been in the process of adjusting some names. So Meet is the platform that we use with kids in your school domain. That is your video platform, and it allows you to do both video recording, and you can even turn the video off and just do audio recording. So if your kids aren't allowed to be on video, you could choose to have them join Meet and do audio if that's permissible. The best thing right now about Meet over other platforms is you're staying within your Google domain, and we'll talk about some settings in a little while, but if your settings are set up correctly, through June, the ability to record your meetings is free due to the COVID situation, and those recordings are automatically saved into your Google Drive. Even better, the chat transcript is also saved automatically, because that's usually a concern for us about what happened in chat while we're leading a class. Google Slides is going to give you a chance to use presentation software. It allows for students or teachers to work individually or collaboratively on files. Even better, it can be used beyond just somebody giving a presentation. It can be used for students to show what they know, which helps you to maybe use it for assessment or collaborative purposes, even possibly for communication, because students can communicate within them and give feedback. I'm gonna apologize. That is my dog going crazy because the mailman rang the doorbell, so sorry. Google Docs is a word processing software file. It behaves like Google Slides in that it allows you to be able to share and work collaboratively or work independently. And both of these tools are super easy to use through your Google Classroom platform. This one may be one you're not as familiar with. It's called Jamboard. And if you looked it up online, the first thing you might find is there's actually a physical interactive board called Jamboard that Google makes. But the beauty of it for us as schools is we don't need the physical Jamboard. We just need the software turned on, because the software portion of it will give you an interactive whiteboard with some simple tools. A teacher could use it to maybe show math problems and how to complete them. It also could be used amongst the kids, either individually or collaboratively. So again, you're staying within Google's workflow. You're able to push it out through Classroom, but you get those functionalities. A final one I'd recommend, and this might be more for your teachers than kids, is if you're not already using Google Calendar. Teachers may need a reminder or to schedule things because we're working in different circumstances. I know in my life when I moved out of the physical classroom and having bells ringing, it was how do I make sure I'm where I need to be or don't forget something at the appropriate time. So setting things up on a Google Calendar with notifications can be a powerful help for your teachers. Now, those are the things that teachers are going to see. Here's a piece that you might not even see as principal because you probably have somebody who takes care of this for you. But there are some considerations that you should take with the Google Admin Console that as a leader will determine some of your workflow and access for your school. So first of all, it can be located at admin.google.com. Just a word of warning. If you are not a super user in your Google Admin Console, you cannot access it. So just want you to know that up front because I don't want you to panic if you can't get in. So that leads to the question of who are your Google Console admins? Sometimes it's somebody at your diocese. Sometimes it's a tech person who's on your campus. Now, I want you to notice I have two people here, and we asked who are because the best guidance is that you need at least two people to be super admins, and here's why. If one person gets locked out or they're in the hospital and can't help you, Google is not going to let you call in and say, hey, we're locked out, and they're not going to bypass it and get you in, which is good for security, but bad if people haven't set themselves up correctly on the back end. So you need to check into who your Google Console admins are and probably have a discussion about some of the settings we're going to talk about coming up. So you as the principal need to be in on the loop of who decides what your settings are. Some of those settings will be decided by diocese or school policies. Some of them will be up to you as a school or as a school leader to come up with and tell your person to set up for you. So I want to point out a few very specific ones right now that are important to this process. One of them is in Drive and Docs. These sharing settings are key. A lot of times a common setting for schools is to set it up so that students cannot share their school files outside of your school domain. What that means is they couldn't share it to someone who's not able to log in with one of your addresses. So like at whatever the back end of your address is, that is the kids login, they have to have that type of account to be able to communicate and share out. Another important thing to discuss with the person who takes care of your settings is the fact that teachers can have different settings from students, can be different from administrators. You can divide your school up into what are known as OUs, or organizational units. Common ones are for teachers, for students, for admins. Sometimes people will set up devices in their own OU to control their permissions. And this will allow you to have a more granular control. While the students may be locked out of sharing outside of the domain, sometimes you may want to allow teachers to share outside of their domain. So those things come down to school preference and school comfort and policies for your district or school. Google Classroom, if you're going to use it, has some really important settings. I'm actually going to start with this lower one first. Class membership. talks about who can join classes in your domain. Ours is a test domain that we play with, and right now it's set to any user. Schools generally will set it up where only users within their domain can set it up. Just another word of warning. If you don't have Google set up yet, and your teachers are trying to use Classroom with their personal Google accounts, please note that's against terms of service and it doesn't preserve what you need for privacy and security settings. So please make sure your teachers are in a school domain using Classroom with Kids. You also have the ability to set up Guardian access. Now, first you have to turn it on. Once it's turned on, the teacher will go in each class and invite the parents by putting in their email address. A parent will then go in, respond to the email, and choose how they want to get their updates. Please note that this is not access to a child's Google Classroom. They're not going to have access to their assignments, and they can't go make comments. This means a parent would get periodic emails, and they choose how often, just stating what's going on in Google Classroom. It's kind of a summary of what's going on. So just be aware of that. This one's going to be super important if you're using Hangouts Meet, because first of all, if you're going to use the video calling and the voice calling, you actually have to turn it on. And there's a decent chance that in a lot of your schools right now, that's turned off. So you have to decide, does this situation mean we should turn it on? If you choose to turn it on, this one's super important. Earlier, I told you that Google has turned on the ability for recording in all accounts, and it is free. It's free through June, but here's the caveat. You actually have to have your person come in and turn on the ability to record. I would probably leave off recording for students, but I would tell my teachers to record, and Dr. Miet's policy is as soon as they go into the meeting, the teachers turn on the recording function. But again, you have to turn it on. As a principal, you might want to use this setting, which is also free through June, streaming. That means you could do a live stream through Google Hangouts Meet. And that way, if you wanted to do something to the whole community, it would be a little safer. In the earlier group, we talked this morning about something that's happening called Zoom bombing. If you are sharing publicly your meetings in an ability where people can join in, unfortunately, they've had some issues with Zoom where people have joined into public meetings, taken over the screen, and they've shared inappropriate videos. By keeping everything in your domain and by keeping any links to meetings private and within your places like Classroom, you're keeping people out. And you're adding that extra layer of security for your kids. Jamboard is simple. You just have to turn it on. There are no other settings for Jamboard. But here's the most important one and the most common mistake I see schools make. Google Vault is the part that preserves information for legal reasons for you to go back and look through if there are reports of problems with the way children are behaving or even adults. And a lot of times when we help schools look at their settings, what we find is that their Google Vault is off. So you need to make sure that this is on. But then there's a second step. On their Google Vault, you can actually click the link when you're in the admin console, and it will take you to the eDiscovery website. Once you turn it on, the mistake I see the most is that they don't come in and create the retention rules. You have to come in and actually create and turn on the rules for how long each of the apps is holding information. Now, if you don't have this on, best practice, I think right now, turn it on indefinitely. You can worry about what your diocese policies and how many days to set it for once we get through COVID. The most important thing is to make sure that you will have all of this set up and turned on so that you are legally protected. I can't emphasize this enough. Your plan is going to change over and over and over. You may have A, B, C. Our group, when we were setting up this slide deck and webinar, said maybe that's a Z written in pen under the plan C. You're going to revisit. Some of you may already be rolling out and realize you need to reset some of what you're doing. There's nothing wrong with that. We're all learning as we go, and it's okay for you as school leaders to model making changes and adjusting plans to make it fit best. So let's go back to Dr. Miette. Her big steps were, what are the instructional design elements that must be present? What are the non-negotiables? What kind of functionality and tech and how will it work for her school? What are the policies she expects teachers to adhere to? What are your critical applications? And I'll remind you again, don't throw every tool at the teachers just because they're out there or just because they're free. Give them some key tools and have them use those. Make sure your Google Management Console is set up in the right way from your lens and for your school's protection. And please make sure you're communicating with your parents. And that then leads us into the point where you're going to be able to take that planner that I know Mike's been dropping in for you guys and be able to go back to some of this and rewrite and think about what have you done so far, what do you need to do, and what do you need to put in place. So is this...
I also dropped the sample schedules in as a resource as well. So
Perfect.
If you were looking for that, that is in the chat. And at this time, we're actually going to turn it over to Sister Elaine. Sister Elaine, yep, she's here. She's going to talk to us today about the Ministry of Presence. She was a former superintendent of the Diocese of Rochester and William Charleston, and she's currently the executive director of the Innovative Catholic Schools Network. And she's here to talk to us a little bit today about the Ministry of Presence.
Thanks, Mike. I was kind of surprised to see my picture show up there. Thank you. So this is arguably a time of great distress for those who are in our care, and for those of us who are charged with the responsibility for Catholic school education. Our concerns are rightfully for the continued education and well-being of the children and young people who have been confided to our care. And it's difficult for us to separate ourselves or to dismiss our concern for the very future of our schools sometimes. So what I'm about to say is in kind of complete, or to refer back to some of the things that Marcy pointed out in terms of communication. I would urge you to give serious consideration to your primary call to be the spiritual leaders of our school communities. It is that role that calls us to be genuine servant leaders, leaders who are called to serve. This is a time when we as servant leaders are called to exercise a ministry of presence. During this time especially, it is important for principals, presidents, school leaders, others who are in school leadership to reach out to parents and/or board members to check in with them, not about school necessarily, but about how things are going. It's important for us to offer a safe and discreet opportunity for parents to share if they need to, about family. They have prayer requests, so they need some spiritual assistance in trying to figure this all out, or they just want to talk about their kids. In other words, the principal should express a ministry of presence during this time especially. Thoughtfully done, this will gather the school community, build or continue to build a sense of belonging and closeness that may well strengthen bonds with the school and perhaps, and even likely, prevent a surge of departures at the end of all this due to financial concerns on the part of the parents. So please make an effort to not focus only on the loss here and on the complicated, maybe for some people, the complicated issue of putting technology into place for remote education. What is. But it's really important at this time for us to shift our focus to this opportunity to live our missions as servant leaders for our faith communities and to exercise a ministry of presence at a time when people are feeling isolated. And with that in mind, if you yourselves, principals who are on this webinar, need a place to talk or vent or whatever, please feel free to email me. You see my email address up there. I will share my phone number with you at that time and also include you personally in my own ministry of presence. I will keep you informed and provide suggestions for spiritual and emotional support. Take care and stay well. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Elaine. We appreciate it. So at this time, we're going to open up the time for Q&A. So many of you have already posted some questions in the Q&A. Over the next couple minutes, if you would like to also post some questions in there, feel free. But I'm going to start off with the ones that are in here, and then as you post more, we will go through and answer those to the best of our ability. So one of the questions we received very early on, Marcy, in the conversation was, when you were talking about permissions, would we need to get permission from parents if the teachers and students are communicating through Google Hangouts, but only with text, not video?
I think a general rule of thumb is maybe giving some type of, maybe even if it's not permission, if you've done some type of Google permission when you started Google or at the beginning of the year as opt-in or opt-out, maybe just a reminder or an update to parents of what tools you're utilizing, and that if they disagree, they should contact you and then they could opt out. But keeping them in the loop is going to be critical here.
Absolutely. And so this kind of goes along the same idea as considering the recording of Google Meet, Hangout Meet sessions with for office hours in order to protect teachers from that one-to-one session time with students. And what are your thoughts on that, and how do you address that?
Wait, say that again?
So students who are meeting with teachers one-on-one in a
Okay.
Google Meets Hangout session, should you record it? Should you not? What are your thoughts on that in order to protect the teacher?
My thought is that I would, if I was the principal, I would ask any teacher, anytime they open a Hangout, whether it's just voice or it's video, that they immediately hit the record button. Because remember, your Google Drive doesn't have a storage limit in a school account. It's not like you're going to have to worry about space. And I think the reality is that just gives you that extra layer of protection.
Absolutely. So another question was, I know Google is working on a fix, but is there a way to prevent students from video chatting with each other outside of disabling it through the OU?
So yeah, no, you'd have to go in and say that the kids aren't allowed to start the calls. So you can give it where teachers only have permission to start a video or voice call, and then turn it off where the kids can't start the calls, but they can join them. And I definitely wouldn't give record access to the kids.
Got it. So I'm trying to read through some of them.
Okay.
How do you simply get your school community up and running with just initiating the admin console? This is for someone who has a Google account, familiar with Google Docs, etc., but is now starting with the admin portion. So what are some recommendations that you have just quickly when you start the admin console? What would you recommend just quickly looking through?
So I would definitely start by looking at how your groups are set, or OUs are set up. Sometimes we see schools that don't even have OUs set up, which really limits your control. And then I would start poking through the different apps and looking at what your settings are. You may also want to consider, we do this a lot with schools, we help them go through and kind of make recommendations and listen to what their needs are to help them. Google Admin Console has layers and layers and layers of settings. And sometimes it's easy to miss something that's key and crucial. We showed you a few of those today to kind of get up and running, but there's a lot in that admin console.
Absolutely. Thanks, Marcy. So how to close a Google Hangout so that students cannot talk after the meeting is over?
So unfortunately, the way Hangouts works is that if one person leaves, it allows the others to continue the conversation. What we have suggested, Dr. Miette and I had talked about it, and our recommendation to the teachers was to ask the kids to please leave, kind of see them get out, and then stop the recording and immediately close out. But understand that they can still use links and go in. So that is a limitation. And there's some new updates that will be rolling out in the next 2 to 3 weeks that have to do with how people can mute others and things like that. So Google's already listening to feedback now that their platform is being used more and making some additional changes.
Yep, and actually somebody just commented that Google is working on it. Yeah, the teacher will leave the meeting, then the meeting will end. So thank you for that, Rick.
But could be 2 to 3 weeks. So just know that that might take a little while to show up and it could show up in different schools at different times.
Absolutely. So one of the questions was about, is there a tutorial or webinar that teaches teachers how to use Google Classroom? Absolutely. So we are offering one. I actually have a note on here, and now I have to find it because I have a bunch of screens open, but we are actually, Eduscape is offering a webinar in the coming days. I believe it is tomorrow, and I'm doing 2 things at once right now to double check that. But we will be offering an intro to Google Classroom webinar, where we will take educators who might be new or who may just be unfamiliar with the classroom setup. Maybe they've had it, but haven't really explored it, which may also be the case, but that will actually be offered. I'm just pulling up right now. Yep, that'll be tomorrow at 2:30. So please, at the end, we will actually put in our events page or our events website. Please go there and we'll be able to sign up. I also dropped in the chat as Marcy was talking that NCEA will also be offering a parent focused webinar that will allow parents to start to navigate this on their end. I dropped that sign up link in the chat, so please encourage your parents to be a part of that as well.
And that's Eastern time, 2 p.m. Eastern tomorrow.
Thank you for that. And then for the NCEA one, it's offered at 2 times. I know one is at 12 and I believe Eastern Standard Time, and the other one is at 6, I believe, Eastern Standard Time. And Andrea, taking your head. Did you want to say anything about that? Oh, you put yourself on mute.
Oh, sorry. Somebody had asked in the chat what the content was. It's really going to be, it's going to be a former homeschool mom who is also a Catholic school mom, who's also a teacher. So it's very user friendly, really like setting up a learning space in your home, how to get your kids acclimated to the schedule, how long they should be doing what, sample resources by grade. So hopefully it'll be something that'll help resource your parents.
Thank you, Andrea. So Marcy, can you talk a little bit about teachers using their personal emails at this time?
And I was actually just typing a response directly there too, but yes, that's a good point. Please be careful of that. I know it's a common thing that happens, especially in Catholic schools. Sometimes we're waiting on somebody else to set it up. But especially during this time, what you have to realize is if they're working out of personal accounts, there's nothing keeping those files in the background. When they delete things, they're deleted. Whereas in a school domain, if you delete a Google Doc that you type something you shouldn't have in, or a student does, that's still maintained in the background if things are set up correctly. And so please encourage or / remind your teachers that they really should be in school domains. And we work with schools all the time who've got to get domains set up and get up and running pretty fast. So that's something we can definitely, hopefully work with you guys to help you get that and get people moved over, because you want that legal protection in place.
Absolutely. Thank you for touching on that, Marcy. So one of the questions we got is about PD certificates. At the end of this webinar, you'll actually have the opportunity to fill out the survey we do take these surveys very seriously. We do read them because we do like to hone our work product based off of the suggestions and then meeting the needs of our Catholic community. You'll have the option to ask for a PD certificate in that survey. So please take a couple seconds at the end of this to fill that out, and you'll also be able to request your PD certificate there. So when it comes to, I need to read through this one. This one's a little bit longer. Okay, so I'm trying, so for the admin console. So this was just a comment that Google is very attentive. As you start to come up with issues, feel free to reach out to them. They are very, they especially in this time, I think they're being very responsive to teachers' needs. Yeah, absolutely reach out to Google. They will take your suggestions seriously. The recordings will definitely be posted on our website in the next couple days, but there will also be an email that is sent to you also containing the link. And then I have a question about tomorrow's meeting. So if you're referring to Eduscapes, I would encourage you to go to our website. We're gonna post that in just a couple seconds. If you're looking for the NCEA one, I will post that in the chat one more time right now as I'm trying to do. This is like the epitome of multitasking, and I just trying to make sure I'm posting things in the right place. So there is your link to the NCEA Parents webinar. So thank you all for coming today. There's no more questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to start to wrap it up because I know that you all have a lot of stuff on your plate and a lot of people to support. Hopefully the information you've received so far is very helpful as you start to plan out your strategy for remote instruction and as you support your students, your parents, as well as your just overall school community. We can't underscore the importance enough of staying connected, just as Sister Elaine was talking about, bringing everybody together, supporting them, not just in the education side of our jobs, but also just the personal side and keeping that connectedness running. Our founder believes that, as our founder of Eduscape believes that the Catholic Church is very uniquely situated in this situation to really have a special opportunity to support and stand out during this challenging time. To support not only the educating community, but also the people around you. And because of that, Eduscape wants to come alongside and support you as well. As a result, we created the Remote Schoolworks as a resource. We are offering essentially whatever services you need in this remote time of transitioning from the physical classroom to the online classroom, whether that be remote audit of your Google Management Console, whether that be Google Classroom help and development, rapid online professional development for your teachers, office hours for your teachers to use as sounding boards. We want to provide a total solution to you, even with this remote Schoolworks operations guide, where we have a 4-volume guide that's diving into leaders. What should you consider and what are some steps you should take? Educators, the same, students, and at home. So we have this as a resource to you that as you support your community and you support those around you, we would also love to come alongside of you and support you. We cannot provide a copy of the slides, but the recording will be available in the next couple days in the resources that were dropped into the chat. But as we start to wrap up our time together, I want to encourage you to do a few things. Number one, we love to hear the stories of how this is helping you, as well as how your educators, your students, and your parents are responding. So I'm dropping our contact information into the chat. Please email us at info@eduscape for just general questions if we didn't get to your question today, or go to our events page to sign up for more webinars. If you're looking for more information about the Remote Schoolworks program, please reach out to Alex at Eduscape or Lainey at Eduscape, and they'll be able to answer your questions and direct you to resources that we have available for you. Now, the last thing that I want to say, and I'm going to actually turn it over to Andrea to kind of close this out with some encouraging words, is please, please, please take a couple minutes and seconds to fill out our post-webinar survey. Again, we do really value your feedback, and we do like to see how we can hone our education services to better support you. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, and then we will close out from here.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for all the encouragement in the chat as well, sharing resources with each other, and also just the encouraging words. We're going to continue to try to bring you excellent professional development into what has become the new normal in regard to distance learning. And while we're on the webinar today, I just got an email that my state has closed schools for the rest of the school year. So we're going to continue to adapt we're in this together. I hope that you are taking advantage of the relationships in your home diocese or archdiocese to connect with your ed tech coordinators, connect your grade level teachers to be sharing best practices and supporting each other during this time. I know we want to take care of our parents, we want to take care of our kids, but let's remember to take care of each other as well. So thank you all for your time, and just keep watching NCA and Eduscape for more PD.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for your time, everybody. We're here for you. Have a great day. Let us know how we can help you. Have a good one.
God bless.